I wanted to share my thoughts about Lost Soul Aside already when I was only 10 hours in, but then decided to hold off until I finished the story mode, and I'm glad I did. This won't be a spoiler-free review as I want to show you the whole picture. And if you came here expecting me to tell you that this game is trash, like many other creators do, I have bad news for you. While it's not perfect, I enjoyed this game very much. So now that I hopefully have the attention of the right audience, let's get into it deeper. Lost Soul Aside started as a solo project of Bing Yang, a self-taught Chinese developer who made a little demo in Unreal Engine 4 to put on his portfolio. The initial footage from 10 years ago maybe didn't catch many eyes, but the trailer published in the following year did. It was the time when Final Fantasy Versus 13 transitioned to become Final Fantasy 15, and you can clearly see the inspiration of these games or game concepts in the case of Versus 13 in the character design, areas and combat. The trailer also caught the attention of PlayStation, and they invited Bing Yang into their China Hero Project program, which was meant to provide support to new Chinese developers. We know from interviews that development didn't go as smooth as it should have, especially not through the years of COVID, but finally this February at the PlayStation State of Play, we got a trailer and an initial release date for May, which then got pushed back to the end of August. A lot of people expected this game to be the closest we would ever get to Final Fantasy Versus 13, others saw Devil May Cry in it. For me, I just saw Final Fantasy stapled all over it. You can read my initial thoughts in my article, which I will link in the description. The game launched on PS5 and PC at the same time, and sadly the PC version had lots of technical issues, especially with certain CPUs. Frame drops so bad that battles were a standstill. I have no idea how did I survive some of those. Even cutscenes were lagging no matter how much you lowered the graphical settings. I bought the game on Steam, so was suffering through this day one experience, was even thinking I will have to buy the PS5 version to be able to play, but seeing how responsive the devs were to feedback and were working on addressing the issues, I decided to wait. Luckily, after a few updates, the frame drop issues were gone. I'm not sure if they were planning a day one PC release from the start or only decided on it after seeing the interest in the game, but this might be a good example that day one multi-platform releases are not always feasible, or games need a longer development time to provide the various versions with the same quality. As much as I love to be able to choose the platform I'm playing on, I would rather have a later PC release for a native PlayStation game if it means I will get to enjoy a good quality. Though the game is not perfect, it delivered on my expectations, and through the 35 hours it took me to get through the story mode and a few extra challenge encounters, I got what I signed up for, maybe even more. Final Fantasy to me has always been about the story. The main character and their party facing some calamity with the addition of some personal tragedy or mission. I'm totally expecting a Final Fantasy game to make me cry, as we learn that there is no win without a sacrifice. In Lost Soul Aside, our protagonist is Kaiser, who is already part of a rebel group fighting against the Empire, and in the prologue of the game during one of their missions they also have to face a monster invasion. He meets a dragon-like entity, Lord Arena, who has been imprisoned for a millennia, who then grants Kaiser power to fight these monsters, which are called Voidraks. While Kaiser was already up against the Empire, he also gets a personal reason to keep fighting now. His sister's soul has been taken by the Voidraks. When I first saw the trailer for Lost Soul Aside, this scene was the one which got me really excited, as Arena reminded me of my favorite Final Fantasy summon, Bahamut. I have seen some critics saying there is no character development through the game. The relationship between Kaiser and Arena remains the same, and it just makes me question if people actually pay attention to the dialogues of the game they play. We start off with Arena being quite arrogant, looking down on Kaiser for just being a human, and demands respect regularly, which makes it quite obvious he thinks himself to be a superior being. As we progress through the game, this starts to change. We learn more about Arena and his first contact with humans, and as Kaiser defeats more foes, Arena starts to make more approving remarks, like if at first he didn't think Kaiser capable of facing the challenges ahead, but have been proven wrong. They constantly tease each other, and by the end of the game, both think of each other as friends, maybe even as equals. What is this if not character development? Kaiser reminds me of a very confident Noctis, the one from the trailers of Final Fantasy Versus 13, or the one we see towards the later chapters of Final Fantasy 15. Not a boy still finding his way in the world, but a man who is very much aware of what he can or cannot do, has a mission, a reason to fight, and is ready to pay the price. That being said, I was completely expecting this game to end in a similar way as Final Fantasy games tend to, death of a major character and me throwing the controller across the room as I cry through the credits. I have to say I love to be proven wrong. Lost Soul Aside still showed us that a sacrifice had to be made to save the world, and we have seen characters going through grief and acceptance. But in the end, Kaiser completed his mission, saved his sister, and after saying goodbye to his new friend Arena, he looks towards a brighter future where people inside and outside of the Empire's walls can live in peace and harmony. As much as I enjoyed the bittersweet endings of recent Final Fantasy games, I think I could get used to them having a happier ending. It makes it a lot easier to get into post-story additional content when you don't have to go back and play with characters who have been lost during the main story quest. We don't see too much of the side characters, but still get to learn some about their background via the main story quests. Maybe if the game had a bigger budget, we could have seen more of them or even have them more actively participate in battles. They are mostly present in cutscenes, and some of them will accompany us to certain maps just to then stay at our landing location or disappear to take a different route while we explore the one meant for us. There are various notes scattered around the maps, each of them explaining character backgrounds or events which happened before the ones we are playing through. One of them even shines light on the background of a villain we have just seen being slaughtered, and it was the moment where I didn't know how much was left from the story, but didn't want to put the controller down until I finished. So I firmly believe that people who say the story of the game was awful didn't really pay attention to the various ways the story was presented to us. You don't always get the whole story handed to you on a silver platter. Sometimes you need to take a detour, do a side quest or read notes. Just like Final Fantasy 15, but people also complained about that one being incomplete. Kaiser doesn't have a love interest, which was the right decision I think, given that he is focused on saving his sister, but he still gets to have some tender moments by a fireplace and a few drinks. Since we do get to save the world and the characters return to their normal lives, I can imagine there would be opportunities for more closer bonds to form. I'm sure fanfiction writers would have some ideas. Combat and level design. I'm not good at hack and slash style action games. I played Final Fantasy 16 with one of the assistance accessories on, which gave me extra time for dodging, and I never got the hang of parrying. But it's been the first game I actually played through again on hard mode because I enjoyed the combat that much, and based on the trailer and how similar Lost Soul Aside's combat looked to FF16's, I went into this game with the same expectations. The first boss took me more tries to defeat than I would like to admit, and I was very grateful when after a few failures the game handed me an accessory to boost attack and defense. But as I slowly got used to the pace of attacks and built up some muscle memory of what button did what, I started to do better and could focus on trying to execute combos deliberately rather than accidentally pulling them off by smashing random buttons. I even managed to do perfect blocks, which surprised me as I usually just rely on dodging. The story mode difficulty was about right for me, the right amount of challenge without being too punishing for me to wanting to quit. But I'm not good at action games, so for someone with more experience in the genre, it was probably boring or not challenging enough. This is one critique I've seen not just about Lost Soul Aside but other games too, and I have to agree that hard mode shouldn't be locked behind story completion. Not everyone has the time or desire to play a game multiple times, so they should be able to choose a difficulty setting which is right for them to enjoy the game. There's so much other stuff which could be included to provide a good reason for replay. It's not a subscription game after all. There is no difference in revenue if you complete it in 30 hours or spend 200 hours in it, but you should get an experience which is fulfilling for you and makes you feel like your money was well spent. While I've seen most people praising the combat and saying that's where Lost Soul Aside really shines, there were complaints about the amount of battles ending with a spectacular action cutscene, or how things we have seen in trailers like flying is mainly seen in cutscenes and are not really executable actions. As for the action cutscenes, I didn't mind them at all. At least I got to see some epic moves, which I'm sure I wouldn't have been able to pull off even if they were actual actions. Let us average players feel awesome too, you know? Maybe flying was meant to be a more crucial mechanic of the game, but I guess it was restrictive due to all the platforming where you have to progress by jumping across platforms. I didn't expect this many to be in the game, but I have to say I enjoyed them. It took me a fair amount of trial and error to get through some of them, and I'm sure there were a few for extra rewards which I've skipped, but the ones which were mandatory for the story progressions were not too hard. You get 4 different weapons, each of them having a different playstyle. The greatsword, for example, does slow but heavy attacks, while the spear will let you stay in the air longer or shoot enemies from a distance. Each of them have different mobility tools as well. You don't have to go out of your way too much to have enough points to unlock the skill tree for all weapons, but you can't reroll points. Since I'm never sure if I would want to replay a game again, I like this system as it gives me a chance to try out everything and decide on which weapon skills fit my playstyle the best. There are different ways to combo the weapon abilities with flashy finisher attacks, and there's also an accessory which will grant you a damage boost if you keep rotating between weapons in combat. You start off with one accessory slot and can expand it to 3 via the weapon skill tree. There are enemies with elemental weaknesses, and each weapon has a base damage version and one for each element. You can also use accessories to give extra stats to the weapons. These can be set to show or be invisible, so you can also use it to make custom looking weapons. Alongside the weapons, you can also use Arena's abilities. These will gradually unlock as you complete the story and can be upgraded by doing additional challenges. Just like with the accessories, you start off with one Arena ability slot and you can extend it to 3 slots. There is a system similar to Limit Break in FF16, where Kaiser will fuse with Arena and use empowered attacks. Classic fantasy and sci-fi maps are alternating each other as we go from the world map to the alternate dimension. I really like this split of the game. It provides a variety of scenery, and even though it's not really a huge open world game, you can see it was planned to be at the beginning, as some of these maps are stunning with lots of places I wish we could explore. Early on the game we meet Liana, who has her own place in the story and also serves as our saving point, crafter and shop. I only have myself to blame for not noticing sooner where to buy the crafting recipes, but there is a variety of potions to craft. 4 of them can be assigned to keybinds, and we can only have a limited number of them with us at once, which will then refill from the inventory when speaking with Liana. On every map we encounter a strange teleportation device, which will take us to the dispersed dimension. These are side challenges where you have to defeat waves of enemies, and the faster you complete the challenge, or if you fulfill extra requirements like not defeating a certain enemy or not taking any damage, you will get various rewards. Once you unlock a dispersed dimension challenge, you can access it from Liana as well, so you can revisit them later. There was a recent update which I still need to check out, but it adds a new boss story challenge where you need to complete 100 levels of boss runs and get scored for your performance. A perfect way to keep experimenting with those combos without having to play through the story again. Voice acting. I give this one its own section because this is the biggest critic I've seen about the game, where people call the English voice acting terrible and encourage others to play the game in Japanese or Chinese. I will be brutally honest and blunt here. Native English speakers are spoiled. They take it for granted that the game will have English voice acting, and if it's less than perfect, they complain. I'm sorry, but not every game can have BAFTA winner British actors who perform in Shakespeare dramas for a living. I'm from Hungary. My language is the second hardest to learn after Chinese, and they don't speak it anywhere else in the world apart from my tiny country. We didn't get localized games. It was very rare that a game would have Hungarian subtitles, and the only one I can name with voice acting is The Witcher. For a long time, the only foreign language taught in schools was Russian. Even though my generation got to learn German or English, teachers often were only a couple of lessons ahead of us, so it was a hit or miss if you actually learned enough in school to speak anywhere near fluently. RPGs for this reason were not very popular in my country, as majority of people wouldn't understand the games. My neighbor had a PS1 and had a German copy of the OG Final Fantasy VII. We were blown away that the game had actual story and actual dialogues. We have never seen something like that before. We were playing through it with a dictionary in hand, as 12 years old. I would have given anything to have a game which speaks to me in my native language, and I think a lot of people who criticize the voice acting in games so harshly would be more humble if they had a similar experience as me growing up. I played Lost Soul Aside in English and didn't have any issues with the voice acting. Of course, there were some parts where it could have had more emotion, or hearing the same lines from Liana every time I clicked on her to save was a bit too much, but still, it was alright. Don't forget that these things are done to voice direction as well. The actors often don't get enough context to understand the full weight of the scene they are voicing. And the game's primary language is Chinese. Lip sync was done to match the Chinese voices, so it will be different to look at the characters and hear the native language of the game. I especially loved Arena's voice lines during combat, how he got frustrated when I died, and as I got better and received some praises too, it was encouraging me to do better. I got what I expected from Lost Soul Aside: engaging combat, beautiful character and scenery design, A story which surprisingly didn't make me cry but still had that feeling of the weight of the world resting on the shoulders of an ordinary guy who just wants to save his sister. I agree with the critics that the game has a more AAA price tag and should be lower, but it's also not exactly a AA game. It's somewhere in between. I don't regret the pre-order price I paid for the deluxe edition, as I had a great time, but probably most people would want to pick up the game when it's on sale. I would give Lost Soul Aside an 8 out of 10. Given how much I enjoyed it, I can be forgiving towards its shortcomings and appreciate the work Bingyang and his team put into this project, which was their first game, and I very much hope it wasn't the last. In my eyes, this game is a love letter to Final Fantasy. It was inspired by a trailer, and while most of us just sat there thinking how awesome Final Fantasy Versus 13 looked, Bingyang decided to act on this inspiration and learn how to make something similar. I wish I had the same determination to act on my dreams when I first saw Advent Children. Maybe I would be working at Square Enix today.